So one of the fans on my computer started making a horrible noise. I figured out it was the case fan, and I tried cleaning it out. That didn't work. It still made a noise. So I now decided to replace the fan. And you can get fans, cheap fans, for literally $3 or $4 online. Some are more expensive, fancy ones with lights and stuff. But this is a really easy fix. So I'm going to show you how to do it real quick.
If your washing machine drum has stopped turning, then it could be the belt that has broken. Fortunately, replacing a washing machine belt is very easy to do.
When was the last time you replaced your phone? What about your laptop? Your razor? A light bulb? Probably pretty recently. With a product like a light bulb, you replace it out of necessity. The bulb stops working, you get a new one. Razors are similar. Once the blade isn't sharp anymore, you throw it out and replace it. Laptops and smartphones are a different story. Odds are, the last time you bought a new phone, your old one still worked just fine. A recent study showed that on average, Americans tend to replace their smartphones every 22.7 months, under 2 years. What's going on here? Why do we keep consuming products at such a rapid rate? Short answer, many products are designed to break, wear out, or become useless in some other fashion. The longer answer is a bit more nuanced. There are two factors at work: planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. In a nutshell, planned obsolescence is a strategy that some manufacturers employ to make sure their product fails after a certain amount of time or usage. These days, you'll often hear people say things like, they don't make them like they used to, and in some regards, that's accurate. But the history of planned obsolescence goes back further than you think. In 1925, when commercially available light bulbs were still relatively new, an international group of companies came together in Geneva to found the Phoebus cartel. These companies included some we still see today, like General Electric and Philips, among others. Their idea was simple: restrict the useful life of all commercially available light bulbs to 1,000 hours, thus generating repeat sales and maximizing profit. The Phoebus cartel slashed bulb life from around 2,500 to 1,000 hours, and since these companies more or less controlled the entire market, they could raise prices without fear of competition. The group demanded each member company send bulbs for inspection at their laboratory, and any company whose bulb exceeded the 1,000-hour limit was fined based on how far off they were. This shady practice continued without the public's knowledge until 1939, when World War II complicated international business. This is just one example of corporations conspiring to maximize profits on products that could be much more durable or long-lasting. Another common example is razors. Why sell just one product that a customer can maintain for years with a little care, when you can sell them the convenience of replaceable parts? This is where the two-part pricing strategy really came into the mainstream. You could buy a handle for your razor, and instead of having to keep honing a fixed blade, you could just throw away the old blade and attach a new one. The customer gets a more convenient shave, and the corporation can keep making money from that customer for as long as they need sharp blades. Multiply that by tens or hundreds of thousands of customers, and you have an extremely lucrative business model. Two-part pricing is incredibly common today. Look at video game consoles. You buy the console once, but the company profits every time you buy a game. You buy one coffee maker, then hundreds of pods over its lifetime. One printer, hundreds or even thousands of dollars in ink cartridges. That last one can be particularly egregious, as many printers have been shown to stop printing properly well before their cartridges are actually out of ink. Higher-end examples of planned obsolescence include TVs with sensitive parts installed near heat sources, sneakily reducing their effective life, and smartphones with non-replaceable batteries, which stop holding a charge after a couple of years. Planned obsolescence is only one part of the picture, though. What happens when a product is inherently too reliable to break every year or two? Cars, high-end smartphones and laptops, sound systems, TVs, the big-ticket items that should last you a while because of how expensive they are. How do companies generate repeat sales of luxury items? Easy. They prey on our rabid consumerism. You don't have the new iPhone or Samsung? What are you, a caveman? If you look at the specs, not much has changed, but for some reason everyone has to have the latest, shiniest $1,000 phone. So you buy it to fit in. This is what big corporations do. They make you feel cheap or old-fashioned for not buying the latest and greatest thing, when just a year ago your phone was the latest and greatest, and will continue to be a great phone for at least a few more years. This is perceived obsolescence, and it's really our own fault. We allow ourselves to be manipulated into thinking we're less valuable members of society if we're not actively engaged in mindless consumerism. You have a car from 2014? How is that thing still running? Your TV isn't 4K HDR? How can you stand looking at that? It's an endless cycle. Maybe we deserve this consumerist hell we've enabled. But then again, maybe the corporations should make the greener choice and start producing products with more longevity. After all, every tablet, ink cartridge, or razor blade we throw away contributes to the trash heaps and toxic waste dumps steadily growing around the world. All this said, while planned obsolescence can be seen as a kind of exploitative practice, it's not completely negative. Inexpensive and replaceable products have given people of all income levels access to more goods than would have been possible in the past. We live lives that are much more convenient and comfortable thanks to affordable products, even if they aren't built to last a lifetime. It also provides jobs in manufacturing, giving workers the means to make a living and contribute to society. Think of all the small companies making phone accessories. Millions of phone cases, screen protectors, and countless other knickknacks keep these companies afloat and profitable. Even things like smartphones can be excused, for the most part at least, because whether we like it or not, the technology is improving on at least a yearly basis, which leads to more powerful and capable devices. Sure, Apple and Samsung make a killing on their flagship phones, but most of the technology is available in less expensive devices, which benefits the consumers who aren't willing to shell out $1,000 on the top-of-the-line model. Even if the battery stops holding a charge in 3 years, the savvy consumer will just buy a newer model once the price is dropped, making the hassle of replacing a battery irrelevant. Positives and negatives aside, this overly consumerist culture might be on its way out. Some smartphone manufacturers are working on modular or easily repairable devices. Ride-sharing services are incredibly popular, and some modern cars, like those from Tesla, are fairly future-proof thanks to over-the-air software updates. Even car ownership may become a thing of the past, as fleets of self-driving vehicles become available for instant rental. We may start to see a dramatic shift in perspectives on ownership in the coming years. Whatever your purchasing habits, just be aware that yes, planned obsolescence is a thing, but not in all cases, and it's not always necessarily a bad thing. And no matter how often you replace your smartphone and laptop, you can rest easy knowing that your valuable personal data is always secure with Dashlane. The new and improved Dashlane is more than just a multi-device password manager, even though it does do that really well. It also offers a super secure VPN to keep your browsing absolutely safe. No ads, no data collection, and easy access to the peace of mind that can only come from 100% secure browsing. Dashlane also offers dark web monitoring, a service that scans the web for any leaked personal data and sends you alerts, so you can take immediate action to protect your accounts. The kind of data usually targeted includes things like usernames and passwords, credit card numbers, social security numbers, phone numbers, and postal and IP addresses. Thanks to dark web monitoring, you never have to worry about that again. Dashlane's dark web service scans more than 12 billion records attached to hacks and data breaches, with almost 1 million new records added every day. Try out these awesome new features by signing up for the 30-day free trial of Dashlane Premium. And if you really want to get serious about online security, use the coupon code SECONDTHOUGHT to get 10% off your subscription.
We all love to dream and feel passionate about our ideas, but most of us struggle with the execution. Meet Bob, Shilpa, Paul, and Laura. They all have great ideas. Bob is a software developer. He has built a software which uses a smartphone to check a car's health. Shilpa is a fashion designer. She wants to start her own business. Paul runs a charity institute for impoverished children in Africa. He wants to expand to more countries. Laura is a housewife. She wants to start a music school. There are many others like Bob, Shilpa, Paul, and Laura who have great ideas they want to execute. What do they need? They need money. Also, wouldn't it be great if they got early feedback from people, whether their ideas or products are really exciting? What do? Use bank loans or credit cards, but they have to pay that money back with interest. They could ask for voluntary donations, but not many people feel comfortable asking for charity. They could go to angel investors or venture capitalists, but would lose control of their product at a very early stage. What do they do then? Well, there's been something waiting just around the corner for the last decade, and in the last few years, it has raised more than $5 billion. It's generating more interest every day within budding entrepreneurs and small business owners who want to take it to the next level. It's called crowdfunding, where crowds come to support you in return for some unique rewards and experiences. Through this, you generate the fund and also get the early buyers who believe in your product and would wait eagerly for its launch. Look at Emma. She is a teacher. She's always had a great inclination about fashion design, but never had the chance to pursue it professionally. She would like to support Shilpa because she's ready to share some of her exclusive designs with Emma, and has also invited her to visit her studio and share suggestions. Like Emma, there are many others whom Shilpa knows personally, or who might see her campaign online and want to support it, in exchange for some unique rewards like custom-made designer shirts or being able to name a product Shilpa is launching. They all fund Shilpa's campaign. Someone gives $10, someone gives $100. She provides different kinds of rewards for different donations. She keeps everyone updated about her progress. Once she gets the money she had asked for, she starts the clothing factory and gives the rewards to everyone just as she had promised. Through this campaign, she has already built a fan base who have sponsored her and might buy her products in the future as well. CrowdNand is the platform where people like Shilpa, Bob, Paul, and Laura, and many more can come and run campaigns for their projects. CrowdNand helps them to build the campaign, run it, promote it, and enable the creators to collaborate with like-minded people. Also, if Shilpa needs to hire skilled employees for her project, she can post details for the position as well on CrowdNand, and people can apply for the job. This is called crowdsourcing. Perhaps this is a job Emma would be interested in doing part-time. CrowdNand is an intuitive platform. We have built it with lots of passion and tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. Unlike other crowdfunding websites, where you have to be an expert to build, run, and promote your campaign and do the market research to reach out to your particular client base, CrowdNand is here to help you at each step. By the way, CrowdNand offers the lowest fees in the market, and it's global. It offers crowdfunding and crowdsourcing services, it keeps your personal data safe, and its industry-leading payment gateway is PCI compliant. CrowdNand. Collaborate and get rewarded.
Ownership matters. It gives people a say in the things they care about. Being an owner in a business, for example, gives people motivation and a stake in its success. But over the last 30 years, the number of people who have control over the businesses that shape our lives has become smaller, not larger. It's no surprise that when you ask them, people say they have no influence in their workplace, over businesses, and over the economy as a whole. Cooperatives, however, offer a solution. From the outside, they may look like any other business, but inside they are very different. They're owned and controlled together by the people closest to the business: employees, customers, residents, suppliers, not distant shareholders. They have an equal say in how the business is run, and they even decide what to do with the profits. And cooperatives work. There are nearly 7,000 independent co-ops in the UK. They're found in every sector, from high street retailers to farmer-controlled businesses, cooperative pubs and credit unions. Some of our most famous brands come from cooperatives, from champagne and parmesan to Lurpak butter and bird's eye peas. Even Barcelona Football Club is a co-op owned by its fans. Co-ops contribute £37 billion each year to the British economy and boost UK productivity, innovation and entrepreneurship. And they work for the 15 million members who together own the UK's co-ops. Cooperatives give people, in fact all of us, more control over the things that matter. What do you want to do together?
You wouldn't think of going fishing without bringing along the right tools for the job, would you? Then why go to work without wearing the correct PPE for whatever job you do? What's that? Glad you asked. Personal protective equipment includes things like hard hats, safety goggles, hearing protection, gloves, high visibility vests, work boots, fall protection, and more. PPE can prevent painful and possibly crippling injuries while you work. After all, nobody wants to get hit by a falling object, poked in the eyes, burned by chemicals, or fall into a deep hole. Right? Right. It's important to choose the correct PPE for the types of hazards you encounter on your job, whatever your job might be, from medical technician to construction worker, auto body finisher, or even landscaping contractor. There can be dangerous conditions that require personal protective equipment that not only fits you well, but is also in good working order without cracks, tears, or holes. Yikes! There may not be anything that can protect you from a shirt that loud. No, that probably won't help. But regardless of your supervisor's taste and fashion, if you have any questions about the type or quality of PPE that's right for your job, he or she is the one you should talk to. You can also consult your company's employee manual or even look at OSHA regulations online. Remember, everyone has the right to work in a safe and healthful environment. Access to correct, well-maintained and well-fitted personal protective equipment is an important part of that right. The point is, wherever you work and whatever you do, there should be a culture of safety at your workplace, one that's enforced and encouraged every day. No excuses, no exceptions. So be sure to take these steps. Learn about specific hazards you encounter on the job. Choose the proper personal protective equipment made to guard against those hazards. Make sure that your PPE is in good working order and that everything fits you comfortably so you can wear it every day. After all, you don't work to get hurt. You work so that you can enjoy your life with friends and family. Hey!
From the food we eat to the clothes we wear, we want products made with respect for the workers who make them. Today's complex global supply chains raise more questions than ever. What is ethical trade? Who's responsible for it? And how can we achieve it? The Ethical Trading Initiative exists to help find the answers. ETI is an alliance of company, NGO and trade union members who share a vision of a working world free from exploitation. Ethical trade means taking responsibility for working conditions throughout the supply chain. It's good for workers and it's good for business too. All of our members subscribe to ETI's base code, enshrining workers' rights. Our members share experiences and information. We're global, with a presence where it counts. We're innovative, helping to establish, hone and share good practice. Most of all, we're about partnerships. ETI creates networks that help make a difference. Today, through our members, we reach more than 10 million workers worldwide. But as global supply chains increase in complexity, simply reacting to the challenges isn't enough. It's time to look at ethical trade in a different way. It's not about compliance, it's about transformation. We're all responsible for trading ethically. In 2011, the United Nations issued a framework that makes new demands of business. ETI has adopted this framework, and we're part of a global movement to put its principles into practice. We're championing transparency and accountability, and using our influence to shape policy where it counts. We're helping forge locally owned solutions that ensure workers' voices are heard in the decisions that affect them. And the results are worth it. Share our vision of an end to exploitation and a global supply chain that works better for everyone. ETI and our members are charting new territory in the protection of workers' rights. Join us on the journey.
In today's video, we're going to take a look at life cycle assessments, which analyze the different stages in a product's life cycle in order to assess its impact on the environment. After seeing exactly what a life cycle assessment is, we'll take a look at an example by comparing plastic bags to paper bags, and at the end, we'll consider some of the problems associated with life cycle assessments. There are 4 main stages to a life cycle assessment: extracting and processing the raw materials, manufacturing and packaging your product, using your product, and finally disposing of it. And the important thing about each of these stages is not to memorize lots of facts or examples, but to generally understand them, so that you can apply that logic to compare different products. When we extract resources from nature, we often directly damage the local environment. For example, because we're cutting down forests for their wood, or digging huge mines to extract ores. Meanwhile, processing these materials can often indirectly damage the environment, both because of the huge amounts of energy that are often required, like when extracting metals from their ores, or during fractional distillation of crude oil, and because lots of pollutants can be released, like when cleaning extracted ores. Next, let's look at manufacturing and packaging. The 3 main problems are energy use, the release of pollution, like carbon monoxide or hydrogen chloride, and the production of waste products. Sometimes we can use these waste products as raw materials for something else, but usually they're useless, and they have to be disposed of. When considering the impact of using a product, we need to look at 2 things: how much damage it does during its lifetime, for example how polluting driving a car is, or how much damage fertilizers do when we consider runoff into the environment, and also how long the product is used for. If you buy a nice bag that you use thousands of times, that's very different from a single-use paper bag. Finally, we have to consider how we dispose of the product. If we place it in landfill, then we've taken up space that could have been used for nature, and chemicals might seep out into the surrounding ecosystems. If we burn the waste products though, then they might release pollutants into the atmosphere. And either way, we have to consider the energy used to transport these items to landfill or to the incinerator. Now that we have an idea of the different stages, let's compare plastic bags to paper bags. The raw material for a plastic bag is crude oil, which is a finite resource and has to be separated using fractional distillation. On the other hand, paper bags are made of wood from trees, so reduce the habitat available for animals and plants. For manufacturing plastic bags, the hydrocarbons from fractional distillation will need to be cracked to make alkenes, and then these can undergo polymerization to make plastics. Meanwhile, for paper bags, the timber has to be pulped, which means broken up into little pieces and then soaked, which can require loads of energy and produces lots of waste. When it comes to using either of these products, it's obviously going to depend on the particular bag. But in general, plastic bags can be reused multiple times, while paper bags are only single use. Finally, for disposal, plastic bags are really bad because they're not biodegradable, and so they take up space in landfill, or they might get into the wild and harm animals. On the other hand, paper bags are far better because they are biodegradable, and they're also non-toxic. The last thing we need to look at are the limitations of life cycle assessments. For starters, most of the time making products involves loads of different steps, and it can be almost impossible to actually quantify all of them. Even if you do manage to get all of the data though, and you find exactly how much energy was used, how many pollutants were produced, and so on, it's still difficult to assess the harm of each step. For example, how do you compare the production of particulates that contribute to lung disease to the production of greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming? It's very hard to say which of these is worse. The second issue is that because the life cycle assessments are so complex, they can easily be manipulated to deliberately support a particular company, which may be done to give the company positive advertising. And unfortunately, this sort of thing is really hard to notice, again because the calculations are so complex. Anyway, that's all for today. So if you enjoyed it, then please do let us know down in the comments, and we'll see you next time.
I think with ISO 50001, you need to do it as a team. You need to empower people, give them the vision, and after that, let them achieve and bring the great result to the corporation. So the bottom line for me, ISO 50001 is all about people.
Broan-NuTone is a growing company that is making a name for themselves in the field of energy management. The home ventilation producer has prided themselves on their environmentally conscious products. They have spearheaded eco-initiatives in their Mississauga plant since 2007 and routinely examine new ways to enhance environment protection.
It's in our culture that we look at ways of continuously improving things. So we didn't want to stop there, but we wanted to go further and achieve many different things and bring more improvements to the business. That's why we picked ISO 50001 to manage our energy performance at BNC.
The ISO 50001 Energy Management System standard was created by the International Organization for Standardization. Representatives from over 60 countries work together to develop the guidelines that specify the requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and improving energy performance and efficiency in an organization.
Many businesses, when they're talking about improvements, efficiency improvements or business improvements, they talk about expensive software installations or complex automation systems. But really, the key to the success of implementing energy management system is in people. It's the people's engagement that brings a great success at a lowest possible cost.
NRCan's Canadian Industry Program for Energy Conservation, or SIPEC, is a supporter of energy efficiency and a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by Canadian manufacturing companies like Broan-NuTone. By highlighting companies who exhibit an outstanding commitment to energy conservation, NRCan, or Natural Resources Canada, has helped Broan-NuTone and other industry leaders become trailblazers in energy management.
NRCan was a key player on the relationship with other companies. They really put us in contact, to have key player and key leader in the energy leading in Canada, so we could share best practices with them and from there innovate in our home company to become even better.
To minimize energy use and cut operating costs in your organization, visit sipec.gc.ca.
And then I'm going to draw a brief line right here. And this line is going to signify sales. And so sales are going to be obviously different at different points in time. And then we have a series of different stages that we ultimately have to work with here. And so in the first stage, which typically goes right about here, we call this the introduction stage. And so this is the first stage that products go through essentially when they reach the marketplace. And so you might ask, well, what are some characteristics of the introduction stage? In the introduction stage, remember, there's not a great deal of awareness about the product. The product has just come out. It's just been released to market. So the focus here is on raising awareness, on describing the different features and benefits. Advertising expenditures during this stage are very, very heavy because once again, you're trying to raise awareness about your particular product. So you have very extensive promotional costs, very significant developmental costs as well. And so at this stage, typically you don't earn really any profit. You're usually operating at a loss because you're spending so much money simply so people know about you, and you're generally not doing very much in sales. That you're obviously operating at a deficit. So the goal, of course, we do want to get out of the introduction stage. No company can afford to be in this stage for a very long period of time simply because of the resources that it actually takes to ultimately get out of this particular stage here. So some examples of products that are in the introduction stage, at least at the time of this particular recording, include things like 3D televisions, which most of us at least are somewhat aware of that technology now, so it's been around for a little while, but it really hasn't been widely adopted as of yet, right? We've seen commercials and different things for them, but you haven't seen just the huge adoption rates that would be necessary to take that particular product into the growth stage, which is the second stage. The next thing that we look at, our next example of products in the introduction stage, are electric vehicles. We've seen the push towards being more socially responsible and more environmentally conscious, if you will. And so part of that is developing technologies related to reducing harmful emissions caused by most automobiles. However, you really haven't seen them widely adopted yet. Once again, we're very familiar that electric cars are in existence and are being developed, but we haven't seen a large number of people adopt them as of yet, which keeps it in that intro stage. And so you do see some advertisements and different things done to try and raise awareness about the different features, about the benefits, why, of course, we cannot live without this particular product. But you don't see the wide adoption rates that are necessary to transfer it over into more of the growth stage, so to speak. And so usually in this intro stage, you see a very high failure rate simply because of the financial resources required to move products in this particular arena. So you usually see very, very high failure rate, but you also see little competition. And in this stage, typically you are oftentimes the first to market because no other company has proven that you can profitably, at least, sell this particular product. And so in this particular area, it might serve as an advantage because you don't deal with a very saturated market, much as you would companies that are occupying different stages of the life cycle. So moving on, once we get through the introduction stage, or I should say if we get through the introduction stage, we go through what we call the growth stage. And the growth stage is characterized by a number of different things that I'll go ahead and describe to you. In the growth stage, as you can see from sales, which is notated by this orange line here on your screen, we obviously have rising sales more significantly so than were rising previously. And so sales start to climb, the new product begins to attract more customers. The product slowly begins to show a profit. Obviously, as sales increase, it reduces, of course, the burden of those developmental costs. Maybe advertising expenditures aren't as significant simply because there's more awareness already. And what happens is, as a company that is occupying this stage, what happens is that you begin to see more competition. And we've seen this from a number of different things. An example, of course, is in 2007, Apple released the iPhone. And it was one of the first phones, not necessarily that was a smartphone per se, but that was very similar in style to what we see is more common now. And so Apple really pioneered kind of that design and that functionality, if you will, with the applications and different things of that nature. And it wasn't until they successfully implemented that, and then obviously did some sales and were becoming very, very popular, that you started to see new entrants into the market. You start to see Google's Android operating system. You start to see handsets made by HTC and made by Samsung and other competitors in that particular market, because once again, success tends to attract competitors. And ultimately, that's what tends to happen in the growth stage. And so what are some examples of growing products, of course, or products that occupy the growth stage? Tablet computers are, of course, a growing market, have been growing significantly over the last several quarters, and oftentimes continue to double with regards to sales. So that is certainly a growing industry, certainly an industry that's attracted a large number of competitors. We've seen just recently Microsoft coming out with the new Surface tablet. Google has developed its Nexus tablet and also tailored a larger 10-inch tablet, and you see a number of other players in the market obviously developing similar type products, because obviously if it's a growing industry, companies want to kind of locate in that particular industry as a way of maximizing sales, of course. So what happens in this stage is you deal with a great deal of product differentiation, because in the intro stage there's little competition, so there's no one to compete against. In the growth stage, because you start to see more entrants into the market, you have to start to differentiate your product in the minds of consumers, so ultimately you can stand your ground. And if that isn't the case, then you're going to be suffering because of the increased competition. All right, the next stage in the market, or in the product life cycle, I should say, is characterized by sales ultimately going through a decline portion. So we have what we call the maturity stage. And at the beginning of the maturity stage, sales are actually increasing still, as you can see here from this orange line on your screen. But eventually, in the maturity stage, we start to go through a point to which sales begin to decline. And they begin to decline at a pretty rapid rate, but it depends ultimately on that product. And so we know that the maturity stage is characterized by slowing sales growth. The highest profit level is typically reached in the early stages of the maturity phase. But what happens is because of increased competition, what this does is this causes people to compete on price. Product differentiation at some point doesn't work as much. And so what really happens is you start to have people competing on price, so you have a great deal of price cutting, of course. And for what we know about business is when you cut prices, that eats into ultimately what your profit margins are. So you have lower profit margins, which typically produce lower profits. You have increased advertising and promotional expenditures. You do a lot of sales promotions as a way of ultimately maybe doing discounts and various other things, so people will ultimately purchase your product over maybe a competitor's product. And towards the latter end of this stage, you usually have sales beginning to fall as you go into the last stage in the product life cycle. So some examples of products in the maturity phase include laptop computers, include netbook computers. You do have flat screen televisions are in the maturity type stages. Now, one of the things I need to mention is that products can stay in the maturity stage for decades. So although some products may go through the product life cycle rather quickly, like fads and different things that maybe are popular one week and then all of a sudden they're not anymore, certain products can stay in these stages for a large period of time. So you look at, just for example, washers and dryers have been around for a number of different years. They're certainly not a growing industry, but it is a more mature type industry, and they've managed to keep those products in that industry through redesign, through retooling them, through adding interactive interfaces and all different types of features that obviously still make the product necessary. It's not growing, but they prevent it from going into this last stage here. And that last stage is one which we call decline. And the decline stage is characterized by both falling sales as well as profits, but you continue to be profitable in a sense. What tends to happen here in the declining stage is that a lot of companies withdraw a lot of the support that they had for their products and services in the maturity and the growth stage. Because in the declining stage, you typically have a lot of people exiting the market already because they realize that, well, you know what, this isn't going to be pursued for a long period of time. It's a saturated market, and the product itself isn't something that people are looking for. And so they try to kind of migrate to some of the more popular industries and popular products in different stages, of course. So you don't focus necessarily on that. But what happens is these products typically sell themselves. And so you don't need a great deal of promotional support or a great deal of advertising expenditures to actually sell the products. And so by not having those expenditures, that means that you can keep a little bit more of the profit. So you can still maintain a little bit of a profit margin in this particular stage, but you do have falling sales. Now, a great example of this, of course, are desktop computers today, and even, I'd mentioned laptop computers are maturing. We're beginning to see them transition more to a decline, although I don't know if they're necessarily in that stage. But every quarter, laptop sales decline as a percentage of the electronics market, if you will. And the same thing with desktop computers. You're beginning to see, although we still have them, there are companies like Apple, for example, that still have different revisions to existing desktop computer lines, but ultimately their sales are beginning to slow and decrease in number simply because of technology the way that it is. And it's very, very difficult with technology to be involved in the product lifecycle because we can go through these things rather quickly, of course. So in addition to desktop computers, you have VCRs obviously are declining, or have declined, I would say, in number drastically. AM, FM radios, specifically for those, are declining drastically. You even have iPods, for example, are in a declining type industry. You still see Apple making adjustments to them, making revisions to them, and changing the features, changing the design ultimately to kind of retool them so ultimately people will purchase them. But they continue to decline as sales every single quarter. And so that would be another example of a potential declining industry, although Apple still has obviously some support for them. So, I mean, the question here is if we know that ultimately products go through this life cycle, well, how do we keep them from going through them at a rapid pace? And that really just lies in the ability to redesign them and repurpose them. So certain products like baking soda, for example. Baking soda was originally designed to be a cooking type product, so used when you cook, and eventually went through this product life cycle. And so the company that made that particular product retooled it to have more of a emphasis with regards to deodorization. And so as it was sold from a different angle, right, repurposed, and it was promoted as doing something else, well, ultimately you kept baking soda in the product life cycle. It did not decline like we once thought it would because it was being sold for a specific way. So redesigning or retooling products is a great way to at least decrease the speed at which they go through the decline phase, of course. But this is exactly why companies map out the different products that they have, because they need to know at what stage they are occupying, because they want to make sure and have different products available that are going to be introduced and growing to compensate for the eventual decline in other products. And so this is characteristic in a number of different industries, and you certainly see it in the technology industry, technology sector, simply because technology has been changing so rapidly.
So how does a modern landfill work? Imagine a giant plastic bathtub in the ground. Trash is added to the open tub and covered each day with daily cover, such as contaminated soil or ground-up construction debris. As time goes by, more and more trash is piled on, and more highly toxic methane gas builds up as the trash decomposes. This is when you start to get that trash smell. You know the one. Any water that's in the trash, or any rain or snow that seeps through the cover, starts to trickle down through the garbage. When water and waste are mixed, it creates a toxic, poisonous soup called leachate. Leachate contains all the dangerous stuff that's in a lot of what people throw in the trash. The tens of thousands of chemicals, heavy metals, and other toxic materials found in electronics, batteries, prescription drugs, and plastics, just to name a few. Now the leachate, containing these poisons, percolates through the trash and eventually pools at the bottom. One set of pipes collects the liquid and takes it to the collection tank. And another set of pipes collects and diverts the toxic gases. However, only some of the gas gets captured over the life of the landfill. The rest escapes into the air, rancid odor, and airborne toxins that have been shown to travel over 3 miles from a waste site. History has proven that many parts of a landfill system will eventually fail. The collection pipes buried under the garbage will become clogged and eventually break. Liners will be punctured by sharp objects, and the chemicals in leachate will burn holes in the plastic. Even the EPA and Casella's own experts admit all liners leak. If a leak were to be detected, it's too late. You cannot repair a liner once it begins to leak. Small holes become big holes, and eventually the barrier between the waste and groundwater completely fails. How and where the leachate will reach the groundwater is impossible to predict. Hundreds of homes using private wells surround the Southbridge landfill. The next time you take a sip of cool water from the faucet, bathe your kids in the tub, or take that long run in what you hope is healthy fresh air. Think about it. Dirty diapers, broken office furniture, bathroom cleaners all sound harmless enough when you're chucking them into the trash. But now you know.